My name is Dr. Kat Schreier. I want to say thank you to Chairwoman Kling and the other members of the Water Science and Technology Board. I've been meaning to send a letter. I was hoping to get in before this session, although I'm actually kind of glad that I had a chance to watch the first session of the spring meeting of the National Academy of Sciences Water Science and Technology Board on hearing from congressional and federal agencies on priorities for upcoming studies. And because I've worked on all of those issues really as a water planner with 5 degrees in 5 fields and a former member of a National Academy of Sciences study committee on managed underground recharge of recoverable water, managed aquifer recharge, aquifer storage recovery, whatever you want to call it. I actually had 2 graduate degrees, my master's from Chapel Hill and my PhD from Colorado State, both focusing on aquifer storage and looking at the policy, planning, permitting, public perception, other related issues of how we deal with those, how we deal with those new technologies and new management practices. And from there, going into many other newer technologies on reuse. I worked on the water energy nexus. I worked on wildfires. I worked on coastal issues. I've worked on habitat issues. I've worked on so many different issues, food issues, agricultural issues, that so many of the issues that we're looking at here at this meeting today. And I wanted to connect because I recently saw the film Picture a Scientist, which, if you haven't seen it yet, it actually features a National Academy of Sciences study on gender discrimination in STEM and features Marcia McNutt. And it was very clear that the findings of that study made a huge difference in the various cases that were presented, the various storylines of the woman who was sexually harassed by her advisor in the Antarctic, the women at MIT who were not getting the same resources as the men, the woman who is dealing with microaggressions regularly as a Black woman scientist. These are the kinds of things that we're dealing with in the water space as well. Except the thing is, with water, it's not just about scientific discoveries or coming up with new technologies. It's about science and technology in the public interest. There is a clear federal nexus. Most of the work that is done related to water supply, water treatment, sanitation, water resources management, climate, has to do with federal agencies, has to do with federal funding, has to do with federal regulations, has to do with federal studies and incentives and grants and proposal and contracts. So there is a very clear federal nexus, and we're talking about water jobs. Local utilities are, and various water agencies at local level, are major job creators. Okay? The problem is that while we have put so much emphasis on getting more women, as well as people of color, into studies in education in these fields and recruiting them when they're young into these fields, so much of career advancement is heavily dependent upon mentorship and upon opportunities, professional advancement opportunities once you're hired. And so many of the places where water related activities are occurring do not have adequate responses where issues of discrimination, harassment occur. Now, because we've had greater numbers entering the industry, and because there are more men who are accepting at a minimum of women in the workplace and even encouraging women in the workplace and entering into leadership roles, there has been an increase. But we're still not addressing what happens when discrimination, harassment occurs in the water workplace. And right now, especially with our water and wastewater utilities, we have a huge, as well as other water agencies, we have a huge water workforce issue. And women need to be part of solutions. And that includes having effective protections and recourse in cases of discrimination and harassment. This is not just a pipeline issue. We're seeing a huge drop off of women when they get to the point of management levels. And guess what? That's where the millennials are. So all these millennials came in and they're having a great time, and there's lots and lots of women millennials. But now, we're seeing people who are reaching those management levels and finding that they're not getting the same opportunities, that they didn't have the same professional development opportunities, that they didn't get the same levels of mentorship. There's still many places where there's an assumption that women are just going to work for a few years, do kind of the low level tasks of data collection and data entry and running the models and drafting the reports and setting up the tables and all that other kind of stuff. And then when they get to a certain point, they're going to go away and have kids. That they're not really going to become leaders of those organizations. And when things get tough, often commitments to equity, diversity, inclusion, these things go away. And women are an easy target. So, and where there are aggressors within an organization, where there are people who are harassing women within organizations, they're often protected. And we saw that within Picture Scientists over and over again. And to give you a little context, I spent the last 10 years with creating an organization called Water Citizen and doing interviews with hundreds of water leaders, as well as talking to them off camera. When the whole Me Too movement started, a lot of the water organizations started rolling out all the women to say, tell us about all the great male mentors you had, right? Tell us about your wonderful career path and all the men that helped you along the way. And that's great, where women have those champions. And it's not just mentors, it's not just champions. We're talking about protectors. Right? If women don't have that sponsor, that protector, they can be very vulnerable. And when an issue comes up, typically the man is protected and woman has to go away or shut up or both. Now, right now, Congress is considering this massive infrastructure bill. And for the last 10 years, there's been a really concerted effort. And this was part of why I started Water Citizen, to be part of this effort to better communicate the needs in the water space, and to do better adult education and better communication across the silos, and state, federal, local, and all the many stakeholders that are involved, not just public education, right? So many water organizations, they treat the internet as a place to just blast out messages, as opposed to what we've been doing in the last year, finally recognizing the opportunity to actually communicate and engage with a specific audience using the internet. And that's what we've been doing with Water Citizen. That's what we're doing with the Virtual Water Education Lab, where I'm working with Bureau of Reclamation and Local Government Commission and Ducks Unlimited and heads of consulting firms and nonprofits that, who are trying to figure out how to do what they do on the internet. And we're helping them to create these amazing high engagement programs. But you know what? It's definitely not a sustainable living. And for those of you who don't know me or think you know me, I mean, there was a scene in Picture of Scientist where the woman who had been subjected to horrific harassment in the Antarctic actually filed a complaint, and she went to the other grad student, a man who had witnessed the whole thing. And there's a quote from him, something along the lines of, I saw that it was going on and I saw he was being a dick, but you didn't seem to be bothered by it. You didn't say anything. So I figured you were handling it. And so often women don't say anything. Women don't speak up because we're threatened with the loss of our careers. We're threatened with the loss of the ability to support ourselves. And once you get degrees in science and engineering, It's really hard to go back and actually get hired anywhere as a secretary or at any other position that is more acceptable for women. And God forbid you go out on your own, because at least when you're working for a large organization, you've got Department of Labor, harassment laws in theory, but when you're on your own, you're sitting duck. So for those of you who don't know me, or think you know me, I was in my 30s and by far the youngest member of the National Academy of Sciences Study Committee that I served on managed underground storage of recoverable water. So basically any kind of aquifer storage and managed aquifer recharge. And had already, as I mentioned, completed 2 graduate degrees and worked on the very first ASR project in North Carolina when I worked for the Division of Water Resources, and I was contacted by American Water Resources Association to do a national study of every single ASR project and every single regulatory program, which, by the way, the chair of the committee took my report and published it under his own name. And when I finally hired someone to talk to the head of AWWA to reprimand him, he published it again, and then at the bottom in the footnote said that Cat Schreier was the contractor who collected the data. My words, published under his name. This kind of stuff happens all the time. Then I went on to finish my graduate degree finally after not so great experiences with some of the faculty members, but I finished and went to work for a firm that heavily recruited me. They wanted to start a water practice for all their water engineers and scientists that were working on mining projects and oil sands projects and manufacturing projects, and they wanted to work more in the water space, and brought me on to do that, and then sent me up to work on oil sands, where I was brought up to be the manager since they promoted all the men, and almost all of the lower level engineers were women. And I was doing multi-million-dollar projects and introducing all sorts of innovative technologies to the oil sands, but I was also caught in the middle of this fight between the men who would openly ridicule the younger women and me and anyone else who thought that women could actually be leaders. And when I was finally promoted to the level where I could be considered for the first position as associate in the engineering division globally, these 2 younger men were able to very quickly sabotage my projects and my career. And at that point, we were just finishing up with the National Academy of Sciences study, and I had a position lined up to head the Water Education Foundation in Nevada, which I should have taken. But some of the folks in the aquifer storage community came to me and said, look, you're doing such great work on this. We really need your help dealing with the underground injection control rules and dealing with the permitting issues and all the things that came up in the study. And if you start your own practice, we'll help you. We'll give you work. We'll support you. It's going to be great. And I went back and I talked to the folks at National Academy of Sciences, and we decided that we would go ahead and create this forum. So my first 3 months back in DC, I was in a different time zone every week. I was speaking all over the country about the results of the National Academy of Sciences study and inviting people to come to this big forum that we put together. 25 states and 3 federal agencies touching on all these different issues that came up in national academies. And part of the funding for that came from, and we reached out to all these different groundwater organizations, the National Academy staff did. And one of the guys who was from one of those associations set up a lot of the meetings and arranged for a lot of the funding. And every time I went to a meeting, I'd have to have lunch with him, and it would get more and more uncomfortable as he talked about losing his job and losing his marriage, and supposedly we were there to talk about the forum and to talk about other projects he wanted to work on with me. And finally, after the forum, I had another meeting to go to, and he wanted to meet for dinner afterwards, and started drinking. He started drinking, and he started reaching across the table and stroking my arm and stroking my breasts. And I quietly pushed away from the table and got up, got my bag, and went home. intent on not speaking about it, because that's what we do, right? We're taught not to say anything because it'll damage our careers. Just like there was nothing I could do about getting the associate position, there was nothing I could do about this individual who was groping me. And you know, a lot of that happened when I went out on my own and going to groundwater meetings in particular. I mean, one of the nice things about Zoom meetings is nobody can grope you under the table in the middle of a Zoom meeting. But as soon as I left, suddenly all of my contacts stopped talking to me. He had reached out to everybody. I talked to him about all the projects I was working on. And he reached out to all of them and told them I wasn't involved anymore, that they were his projects now. And basically ended any work that I could do in the aquifer storage space. And even years later, when I was out in California just recently, shortly after the passage of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, and all the stuff that I do in terms of the blending, we talked about this morning, the blending of the science and technology and you know, local decisions and governance. And yet, once again, I was blocked from working in that area because of this individual, because there is no recourse. So yes, it's wonderful that we have more women than we used to. And it's wonderful that there are some organizations that are more supportive of women, and particularly individuals. If a woman has a champion, she has a chance. But if an issue comes up, there's still not a clear recourse. There's still processes that favor the organization against the woman who's filing the complaint, in favor of the man who has more resources, very much like we saw in Picture Scientists. Almost the exact same thing. And it happens over and over and over again. And it's not just me. I've been interviewing and talking to so many women over the last 10 years, 15 years. And it's not changing, and we're not acknowledging. And I don't know what the solution is. You know, I mean, we're going to pour trillions of dollars more into infrastructure, mostly into private companies. We've got so many of the planning companies and you know, the water focused companies that focus on planning and outreach and all that, now been bought by these even larger construction firms, where sometimes the planning stuff and the outreach and all that just is a checkbox to get to building stuff, to the high dollar projects. And the more and more money that's going in there, the less likely it is that these issues are going to be addressed, and the more pressure on women to stay silent, because these issues are so important. So a lot of them do. A lot of them either just settle for being some sort of a deputy, some sort of assistant role, that for whatever, you know, man is in charge. That, you know, we've always had women in engineering and science. Remember that, in admin roles and marketing roles and accounting roles. And so often women come in with so much excitement about the kinds of issues that we're talking about here at this meeting, about science and technology and how it's being applied, and end up being asked to do, you know, the project management and the team management and the communications and the, you know, the marketing stuff, and business development. Oh, you're a woman, you're good at communications, go do that. Oh, you're good with people, you're a woman, go deal with the people side of things. Why don't you go do some recruiting on the side as well? Why don't you head this little committee on diversity on the side? And how are they supposed to have time to actually work on science and technology and actually making their contribution in the field? So you know, the older I get, the more I know that my opportunity of ever coming back to a large organization where I can actually have an impact is fading farther and farther away, because we hire young. You know, all those degrees and all those certifications, that's just an entry point. The real development of professionals occurs on the job, with mentors, with champions, with sponsors who help us get up into leadership roles. And where that doesn't happen, we're losing women from the industry. And I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing with Water Citizen until I figure out something else. I am committed to Water Citizen and creating leaders who understand how to work in the virtual space. But I hope that in my speaking up, perhaps other women will be comfortable enough to do so as well. So this is very much an issue of national security. It is a federal issue. There is a clear federal nexus here. We're putting taxpayer money, ratepayer money into all these water projects, into these water organizations, agencies, utilities, consulting firms, contractors, and universities, research centers, right? And where issues come up, women are just supposed to stay silent. And I know that a lot of the things that I'm saying here about women also apply to people of color. And I don't see how we can really seriously talk about issues around equity and environmental justice in society without also looking at equity and environmental justice within the organizations, within the industry. When so many of the men, if they do leave a larger organization, all they have to do is become a leader of a committee or a nonprofit board or water science and technology board, and they could have all the influence and impact and access to contract opportunities to have income. And yet organizations won't take action because, we rely on our volunteers. We can't do anything about our volunteers. That happens a lot in the associations. And there's nothing that women can do. And I guess I was tired of staying silent. So I hope that we can consider taking action with the National Academy of Sciences, that a well-constructed study with reputable leaders in water science and technology can really take a look at what's happening and what's working and what's not working when it comes to women entering the profession, being mentored and sponsored and provided opportunities for professional development and having access to resources and having a place to turn when issues of harassment come up, because there are bullies in the industry, there are sexual predators in the industry, and we really have no protection and we have no recourse. And that's got to change, because water is, look at all the issues we've been talking about today. There's so many critical issues in water, and we need every single water scientist and engineer and operator and technician and other experts and the social scientists and everyone who has a part to play. We need to be able to retain them in water and not lose them like so many women I run into who are now selling essential oils or teaching middle school or becoming health coaches because they can't work in their chosen profession. So that's why I keep typing those annoying little notes in the comments about gender discrimination in the water sector. We're putting a lot of money into water right now, and we need to make sure that it is a place where we can make the most of every person who steps up to work in the industry. Thank you.